Hello everyone and welcome to the Feature Report. So today I'm going to be reviewing the brand new live-action adaptation of Mulan. This movie was released on September 4th exclusively on Disney+. So I'm just going to kick this video right off with a quick review. Off the top of my head, I'm going to give this movie 2 stars. It was so disappointing, and it just felt like another Disney money grab. I will say that it does have pretty good cinematography, but everything else was just average or below average. I will throw it out there that in the moment, while I was watching this movie, it was kind of entertaining. I was watching it with like 8 other people, and it was somewhat enjoyable. We were all joking around and stuff, and it was just the experience of watching it for the first time. But it's just so forgettable, and when I looked back on the movie afterwards, I realized that I actually didn't enjoy it. Plus, it's from Disney, and everyone knows that all this new Disney stuff that's coming out is just not good. It's either live action remakes of these classic movies that are great, these amazing classics that they're ruining with these new live action movies, or they're making sequels that are so bad and ruin the entire franchise, and it's all just for the money. The budget for this movie was $200 million. I cannot imagine how they could pour $200 million into a movie this horrible. If Disney put their time and effort and their skill into something new and original and fresh like they did when they were starting out, then this would be great. They would have probably these great new movies. But instead, they poured $200 million into something that is just not good. As a little comparison, Taxi Driver had a budget of $1.3 million, and that movie is amazing. Mad Max had a budget of $350,000. So you don't need a ton of money to make a great movie. You just need something original and something good. So, anyways, now that my rant's over, I'm just going to go into the in-depth review. There will be a few spoilers, but there's nothing major. If you still don't want the spoil, then you can skip to this time code for the final verdict, but really, there's nothing major at all. Okay, so starting off with the story. The story in this movie just isn't great. I did like that it was not a shot-for-shot remake. The story also has good messages about relationships and being yourself, which I thought was really good. Now into the things that I did not like about the story. The story moved weirdly fast at times. This is nitpicky, but like, let's say Mulan would see this all this snow up on a hill and she would have a plan and then it would just cut to her being up there. It's not like she had to sneak past a ton of enemies or something that would have been really cool to see. No, she's just there. There was no explanation for how people went from place to place, and that could have been a really good opportunity for exposition or growing characters or just some neat shots. The story was also just super predictable and super bland and unoriginal, even though it was very different from the classic Mulan movie. There weren't any like huge twists or anything, and if there were, they were so predictable. But maybe the biggest thing about this story is that it was just not memorable. I watched this movie 2 nights ago as of the time of recording this review, and I'm still having trouble remembering all the points of the story. If I were asked to recall the story of Taxi Driver, I could spit that out pretty well after seeing it only a month ago. Lastly, the story was just changed way too much. Like, I understand that they didn't want a shot-for-shot remake, but the fact that they changed so much just completely ruined the movie. So I'm gonna have to give the story 2 stars. Like, it's not the worst thing that I've ever seen, but it's just not good. So now onto the characters. The things that I did like were that there's this strong female role that didn't really feel too forced, and there aren't a lot of strong female roles in movies. Also, Mulan was well explored. I did like that we got to know a lot about her. But that's where the things that I liked end. Almost every other character in this movie is barely touched upon, and if they are, then they're so generic and bland. I wanted to know a lot more about these characters, but I just didn't get to. The bad guys were also just really confusing. I can't even remember what they were called. I just didn't know who they were. I didn't know why they were so skilled, why they're attacking these cities. And some movies at least try to make these bad guys relatable, or at least so that you can understand their motives. But in this movie, that just isn't present. Probably the biggest issue with these characters is that Mulan is not Mulan anymore. This movie feels nothing like a Mulan movie because her character is completely different. They were clearly trying to do something different so that they weren't accused of being too close to the original, but I mean, come on, change everything except for your beloved main character. The original Mulan is kind and she's like devoted and clumsy, and she's pretty much just a normal person that learns how to fight and learns how to be true throughout this whole journey. But this new Mulan is, yeah, sure, she's still kind and devoted, but she's just a superhero. She doesn't grow at all during this movie. She doesn't learn to fight. She already knows how to, somehow. I mean, I have no idea. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to give these characters 2 stars as well. I just can't give them any higher than that. Like, yes, I have seen worse, but this is just horrible. So now on to the acting. The acting in this movie is interesting. The opening sequence where Milan is chasing that chicken just made me cringe so bad. The acting was so forced and so unenthusiastic. For every character, the acting really is just hit or miss. It's never great, but there are times when it is pretty good. But there are just so many scenes where it is very poorly done. There's not much that I can say except for it's hit or miss, which kind of stinks because a lot of these actors are good actors that just don't perform well in this movie. So I'm going to have to give the acting 2 stars as well. Alright, now on to the visual effects. The visual effects in this movie are also very much hit or miss. Sometimes they work really well, but sometimes they look really bad. There were lots of scenes that were just really poorly green screened, which is weird because that's such a popular and simple thing nowadays, especially when you have $200 million. And some of the animals in this movie, like the witch as a bird and the phoenix, just looked really plasticky and did not look good. So the VFX in this movie aren't horrible, but they don't look real for the most of the time. So I'm just gonna have to give them 2 stars again because although they look pretty good at times, it's not consistent quality, and it ended up taking me out of the moment. So now I'll move on to the cinematography. The cinematography is the one thing that this movie has going for it. The colors are really vibrant, and I like the color palette a lot, and there are some really beautiful and unique shots. One of my favorite things that this movie would do is where the camera would follow movements, like people running up a wall or somebody being flipped over. And there were also some cool drone shots and beautiful wide shots, but if it wasn't a good shot, then it was a bad shot. The action scenes were just really poorly done. There would be some really cool camera movement or something, but because the scenes were so choppy, it would immediately cut away to a regular shot and suck you out of it. The action was also just hard to follow or appreciate because it was so poorly shot and edited. The movie felt like it was going to be filled with awesome martial arts scene, like a lot of Asian cinema is, but instead the fight scenes just felt like a Marvel movie, and somehow even worse. Overall, I would just give the cinematography 3 stars. It is definitely my favorite thing about this movie. It's not horrible. The colors are really great and there are some really cool shots, but it's still not good. Now onto the action. I kind of already touched on this, but the action just wasn't good at all. All the fight scenes were so choppy, and it just wasn't my style of action. I was hoping for lots of long, realistic martial arts fights, kind of like something out of Ip Man or a Jackie Chan movie, but instead I just got people flying through the air and throwing spears, and there were just so many cuts. It also just wasn't done in a style that I enjoy. It was cartoony. There was lots of magic and people floating through the air, which isn't always a bad thing, like in The Matrix with people moving unrealistically, but it was just done really poorly in this movie, so I'm going to give the action 2 stars as well. Again, as for all these categories, I have seen worse, but this is not good by any means. So now the soundtrack. The soundtrack of this movie was just very average. It had that Disney or Marvel feel that was, well, average. It didn't feel like it played a part in the movie besides being there, and it was not memorable. But it wasn't bad, so I'm going to have to give the soundtrack 2.5 stars. I was leaning between 2 and 3, and usually in these sections I don't do half or decimal points, but I just couldn't give it as high as 3 stars or as low as 2 stars. So it's just a very average soundtrack. So I'll give it 2.5 stars. So now on to the final verdict. Overall, I just felt like this movie was another below average Disney money grab. The story, while it has some good messages, it moves too fast and is too predictable, and it is not memorable. They completely changed the character of Mulan as well, and she's no longer relatable because she's just a superhero. The other characters are not well explored either. The acting is hit or miss, and it doesn't live up to the other roles that this cast has played. The VFX is also pretty good at times, but about half the time it just doesn't work. The cinematography is also pretty good. The colors are great, and there are some cool shots for sure, but there are also a lot of average shots or bad shots. The action was just horrid. I could not stand all the cutting and all the floating. The soundtrack is just crazy average. It doesn't get more average than that. So overall, this movie is going to get 2.2 stars, which honestly fits it perfectly. Not the worst thing I've ever seen, but not good. It is just below average and such a money grab. Disney just needs to stop rebooting stuff and needs to make something new, make something unique, so that I can actually feel good about watching their movies, their content, and giving them money besides for The Mandalorian, because that thing is great. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I would really like to know what you guys think about this movie if you've seen it. So let me know in the comments, because I've heard that some people actually really enjoyed it. So make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and hit the like button if you did as well, and hit that notification bell if you would like to know about more of my content. I will see you guys in the next video.